Hey everybody, it's Mike and welcome to Chip Damage. And today we're talking about the console that is probably still hooked up in your aunt's living room. We are talking about the Nintendo Wii. Now, when this console launched back in 2006, despite it not being able to play DVDs or Blu-rays and not displaying in HD or having great online, it seemed like everyone needed to have it. And that was kind of true. This thing would go on to sell 101 million units. To put that in perspective, that is double the number of the Super Nintendo sold, 3 times as much as the N64, and more than 5 times the amount of GameCube sold. That was the console in Nintendo's line immediately preceding the Wii. This thing was a huge success. However, that sales number is somewhat misleading. A huge part of the Wii's success was its ability to capture the casual market. Games like Wii Sports and Wii Fit and those weird carnival games that everyone had were a huge part of the Wii's success. And unfortunately, that grab for the casual market may have been somewhat short-sighted by Nintendo. Later on in the Wii's life, that bubble began to burst. And by the time the Wii U launched, many casual gamers had moved on to mobile gaming, and many hardcore gamers may have felt betrayed by the Wii. And in many ways, in a lot of gaming circles, the Wii is kind of looked back in hindsight as this gimmicky toy that Nintendo did to relatively increase sales, to temporarily give themselves a boost. And that is true somewhat. However, that's not to say there were some amazing games on the Wii. They're just often forgotten about or overshadowed by the amount of shovelware that the Wii had. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. Some of the outstanding, fantastic, forgotten, rare, and weirder games found on the Wii. And hopefully throughout it, we can find some appreciation and respect for this little thing that is often so looked at as a toy that Nintendo just kind of threw out to get a quick buck, because that's certainly not the case. So let's dive into the library, shall we? But before we begin, I just want to mention that if you like what you're about to see, please check out my other videos regarding gems on other consoles, such as the Saturn, Dreamcast, Xbox, PlayStation 2, and so forth. So let's begin, shall we? Mario had pretty good representation on the Wii, but his rival also got some pretty excellent titles. We're talking Wario, we're talking Wario Land Shake It for the Nintendo Wii. This came out in 2008, and this was a 2D platformer that was completely overlooked. This game, when I worked in a game store, just sat on the shelf. I don't remember selling a single copy of that, and that is a real shame, because this is an excellent game. So, obviously, you play as Wario in a 2D world, but this, when I say 2D, this is like the best-looking 2D platformer on the Wii, and one of the most stylish 2D platformers I've ever played. All the sprites are hand-drawn, the stages are as well, and they look amazing. The whole thing is, you need to... Wario is tricked into helping these little critters called the Murfles, who he must rescue from the Shake King. And the whole gimmick of the game is that you hold the Wiimote horizontally, which sounds rough, but it actually works. You grab enemies and you shake them down like a gangster, getting coins from them. You use ground pounds and shoulder charges, jumping on enemies' heads. It's a lot of fun, like a classic Mario. But it's super tight, it's super stylish. It has a really fantastic animated look. And speaking of animated looks, the cutscenes for this game were done by the anime studio Production IG, famous for Fooly Cooly, Ghost in the Shell, and about 500 other things. So this is a easy to find game for a very low price. This is like 2D platforming at its best on the Wii. Don't sleep on this. Wario's fantastic. He's in the classic outfit in this. Check this out. Wario Land Shake It. Not only did Wario's rival in Nintendo's house get a great game, so did Mario's greatest rival, and that is Sonic and Sonic Colors. This is a decently well-known game on the Wii, but I just want to highlight it here. So this game came out post Sonic Unleashed, which was a very polarizing game, which I'll talk about in another video, and right before Sonic Generations, which is generally seen as one of the best 3D Sonic games. This game came out in 2010 on the Wii, and it was a little bit overlooked, and the name is silly. It makes it sound childish and kind of like, I don't know, what Sonic's like coloring book activities, but no. This is a fantastic 3D platformer that is just gorgeous. I would love to see this game re-released in HD. So the whole idea of this is Sonic goes into space to fight Eggman at a cosmic carnival. Yeah, this is good stuff. And he is empowered by little aliens called Wisps that are all color-coded, and depending on their color, they give Sonic a different power, hence Sonic Colors. Sonic can turn into a drill, ricochet off walls, a lightning bolt. all types of great and wacky stuff. This game is beautiful. If I had any bad thing to say about this one, it's that most of the stages share a similar theme of this space carnival, but that's a pretty good theme. Like, the colors really pop. It has great music and set pieces. This is a Sonic classic that is somewhat overlooked, never been re-released. I would love a Sonic package with like this era of Sonic along with like Sonic Generations, and yes, even Sonic Unleashed kind of re-released. But until that day, you still have to get this on the Wii. So check it out, and as a note, you can use the nunchuck or classic controller for this game, so you're not stuck with that kind of rough Wiimote controller. But moving on to another very stylish game that's overlooked, and that is Sin and Punishment Star Successor on the Wii. If you look in like any bargain bin that has Wii games, you're gonna find this. Or I've seen this at like Walgreens on like the DVD rack for $2.99, and that is a shame. So what this is, it's a I struggle to say rail shooter, but that's the closest. Those familiar with the Sega Classic Space Harrier, or even Star Fox 64, any of the Star Fox game, that's about as close as you're going to get. But you're basically going forward in this crazy anime world, playing as these kids, blasting aliens and ships. It's a sequel to an N64 game that was never brought over here until it was released on the Wii Shop. And it's wacky, the story is insane. You can use melee attacks with the nunchucks, blasting, explosions, great effects, just really tight and fun gameplay. There's not much like this on the Wii. Even if you're not a huge fan of rail shooters, like, it is a simple game, but is an addicting, fun, and flashy game. Check this out. Sin and Punishment Star Successor on the Wii. This one won't cost you that much. But what will cost you a lot, until it's re-released hopefully one day, is the Metroid Prime Trilogy released on the Wii. Now, Metroid Prime is a beloved series that Nintendo is teasing us with right now. But if you want to play the trilogy, you still got to get it on the Wii or perhaps the Wii U via backwards compatibility. The first two Metroid Primes, which are, by the way, first-person shooters, like exploratory games, like classic Metroid, exploring huge areas, backpedaling, getting new powers, going back to old areas, using said powers to get new areas. Great classic shooting and exploring game here. The first two were released on GameCube, and the third one was released on the Wii, and they're all excellent in their own way. But then they were very nicely bundled all together in this trilogy here, exclusive for the Wii. And there is some debate whether Metroid Prime 1 and 2 play better on the GameCube or the Wii. It's really up to it's really your preference. Like, I've played both versions. I like both versions. There's pros and cons to both. If you want to play on a controller, kind of have the precision of like a traditional first-person shooter, you're going to have to play that on the GameCube because this trilogy forces you to use the Wiimote. But it's nice. There is some accuracy to a shooter being able to just point at the screen. It works. It's a nice collection. As a note, there are two versions of this game. There is the regular box version, which is expensive. You're looking at like $50 until that re-release comes out. But then there's this one, the tin-cased version. This is the first release and much harder to get. Basically, it just comes with the game, but in a tin case and a giant manual. This is pretty collectible. This can run you $100. But honestly, it doesn't really matter. It's just a steelbook. You want to play these games no matter what the case is. So until this comes out on the Switch, hunt this one down, go through Metroid Prime Trilogy, and see what all the hype is about, if you don't know already. But yet again, give us a damn re-release. All right, moving on to games that were re-released but still great on the Wii. We're looking at Muramaza, the Demon Blade. So this is one of the most beautiful games ever made, just flat out. What this is another 2D game. This is more akin to a hack and slash, but a very tight and polished one, almost like Ninja Gaiden levels of precision and accuracy. You play as a samurai and a princess, Kisuke and Momohime, and you basically just fight through an army of samurais and monsters and traditional Japanese demons and folklore monsters. It's fantastic. Those of you familiar with Vanillaware know that this was kind of their middle game in the trilogy of kind of action hack and slashes. This came after Odin Sphere, and they would follow this game up with Dragon's Crown later on. And each one of them kind of had a different tone and definitely a different theme. The first one was Viking, very Valhalla and Asgard, that aesthetic. This was Japanese, and Dragon's Crown was more Western European wizards and warlocks. This is my jam right here. I love feudal Japan. I don't hide it at all. So this is my favorite one. I think this has the tightest gameplay. Super precise. You can play this on the Wii Classic controller, so you don't have to use the Wiimote. Tons of weapons to collect. Like, you just feel like a badass in this game after all, just cutting down enemies. It's gorgeous. This was re-released on the PlayStation Vita a few years later, and it looks fantastic. And they added some content, some downloadable content to that version. However, unless you, the only way to play this on a television, unless you want to get a Vita, a PlayStation TV, which are very expensive and hard to find, and a Vita memory card, which are also incredibly expensive, you can just go and get this on the Wii, and it's way cheaper. It's still a fantastic version. I love this game. Check it out. Not too much, 30 to 50 bucks for this one. Well worth it. That's Muramaza the Demon Blade. For any fans of traditional Japanese monsters, you got to check this one out. Okay, moving on to a game that's a sequel to one of my favorite games of all time. I've spoken about the first game many, many times, and I've also done a review on the first 4-figure statue release of this game. That is Knight's Journey of Dreams. So this is a special game. Knight's Journey of Dreams was a cult hit on the Sega Saturn. Every game on the Sega Saturn is a cult hit because no one had that. So this was released 11 years after the original in 2007. And you know what? I avoided this game at release. I was so mad that this was a Wii-only release. I wanted this on my fancy 360 or PS3 with HD graphics. I'm like, why is the sequel to one of my favorite games only going to the Wii? That was silly of me. I played this a while later. While maybe not quite as magical as the first, this is still a damn good game. If you like the first one, or if you just like inventive and wacky games, if you're a kid at heart like myself, this is a great game. This is a little different though. Yet again, it's still you flying through a few levels with knights. He's helping out two kids, overcome their problems at the same time of saving the dream world. It's kind of the exact same plot, just kind of like transplanted to England. Like this game has like an English flair. Everyone speaks in this game, which I wasn't a huge fan of at first, but it grew on me. The original Knights is silent. All their characters are silent. There's no spoken dialogue. They talk a lot in this, and everyone has a British accent. I don't mind that. I think it gives it a sense of class being an American after all. Knight speaks, which is odd, and since Knights is supposed to be androgynous, male or female, the voice is kind of fitting. It can be either male or female, so just be aware of that. It is shocking to hear Knights talk at all, but it's still a really charming game. Great color, good control. You can unlock Claris and Elliot, the original characters from the Sega Saturn version in this. It's really inventive. Knights can turn into like a rocket, a dolphin, and a dragon in this. They went for it, and the soundtrack is amazing. So, as a note, Knights in the Dreams has one of the greatest soundtracks of all time in gaming. There's a vocal track in the Sega Saturn version that's sung by a little girl, two children, but primarily by a young girl singer. They brought back that young girl as an adult to sing the main theme of this game. When I found, first off, the song brought a tear to my eye. It was so beautiful. But when I found that out, it's fantastic. Yet again, maybe not the same team making it, but this game has the same heart. Knight's Journey of Dreams. Check this out. Not expensive, easy to get, and not on any other console. Knight's Journey of Dreams. And speaking of dreams, I gotta take it down a little bit because I want you to believe me. The next game we're going to talk about is very special to me. This may be my favorite Wii game or one of my favorite games of all time. And that is Fragile Dreams, Farewell Ruins of the Moon. Weird title, I know, but please listen to me on this one. If anything, this is the one game I would like you guys to check out if you're interested in getting some good Wii titles. Now, let me start off by saying this is not a refined game. This is not a game you're going to necessarily play for the gameplay because that part is rough. This is not a great playing game, but it's one of the most memorable games I have ever played. So this game came out fairly late in the Wii's life, 2010, about a year after its Japanese release. And the plot of this game is that you play as this young boy Seto, voiced in English, by the way, by Johnny Young Bosch of Trigun and Power Rangers fame, Bleach as well. There is a dual audio option, but he does play the game in Japanese, but he does a fantastic job if you play it in English. He plays this young boy Seto, and his whole life he had lived with an old man by themselves. And when the old man passes away, Seto is alone. And he happens to be probably the last human on Earth after an apocalypse that you uncover the mystery of later. And he's all alone in the world except for his talking backpack. More of an AI that he kind of talks to. And this game has such a somber tone. Right off the bat, the feeling of isolation, this sweet sorrow is so apparent. Now, I know that sounds pretentious, but this game really nails it without beating you over the head with themes. The sense of isolation is just intoxicating. The backgrounds in this game are some of the most beautiful vistas I've ever seen in a game. And I'm talking about comparisons to all the great JRPGs out there, Final Fantasy and Xenoblade and Okami. Like, this is up there with them. And this game isn't even HD. So continuing on, Seto sees a young girl his age, and he scares her off, and he goes on an adventure to see her, to meet her. She might be the only other living person on the planet. And along that journey, the things you see are just unforgettable. And yet again, the game doesn't actually play that well. If I had to describe the genre of this game, I guess I would say survival horror with RPG elements, but that's a really bad descriptor. Like, yes, you have to use the Wiimote in this game, and Seto isn't exactly a great fighter. Like, you pick up sticks and rods and you kind of just bash, and like the Wiimote is also like your flashlight because you go into many dark areas, and there's some boss fights that are kind of clunky, and it's not a fantastic game if you're looking for like some cutting edge, refined action or survival horror game. But if you're looking for a game that is brimming with heart, this is the one for you. I'll give you an analogy. This game feels like a gift. Imagine, have you ever received a gift from someone who is not fortunate, like less fortunate than yourself? Like someone you know who didn't have a lot of resources or money, but they still remembered your birthday and gave you a gift. You know how like much more meaningful it is because they thought about you? That's what this game feels like. If you're a parent, you know, like those little gifts that your children give you that they make in school, which says like world's best dad. And you know, it's made by a kid. It looks a certain way, but you love it because it was made with love. That's what this game is. It's not perfect. It's not the top of the line, but it's brimming with heart. So please check this out. Fragile Dreams, Feral Ruins of the Moon. I couldn't gush enough about this one. It is a nice note. This is a really nice cover. However, one thing you can do is flip the cover and make it reversible, because this is also very beautiful art if you see that. And I usually do leave it just like that. The girl with white hair is the girl Ren that Seto is searching for, and yeah, this game. This one, unfortunately, is going up in price. It's starting to finally garner the respect it deserves, and it's running up to close to $80. But if you have that kind of disposable income, this is definitely one to check out. So yeah, Fragile Dreams. We got to move on though. So switching gears, the Wii was not just about cutesy and fun and heartfelt games. There were some great action games on that console. I'll go through them briefly because these are somewhat famous on the console. We're going to take a look at the duology of No More Heroes games, which have been thankfully re-released on the Switch very recently. You may know about these ones, but they were originally released on Switch. What these are is that you play as a guy like me, a 30-year-old otaku, who orders a lightsaber in the through the internet, like through eBay, and decides to enter the Assassin's Guild in order to get laid by a sexy secretary that works for that guild. You must kill your way to the top, at least in the first game, of the Assassin's Guild. You must become the #1 assassin by taking out the top 10 assassins in front of you. It's wacky, it's crazy, it's irreverent. This is made by Suda51, one of the auteurs, a very punk rock director that I love to death. I check out all his work, but this is kind of like his magnum opus series. This is the game that kind of put his name on the map. Fully suggest them. There are better versions of this game, debatably. This was re-released, the first one at least, on the PlayStation 3 North America's No More Heroes Paradise. That game is a little jankier than this. That one has a little slowdown on the PS3, believe it or not, but it has 5 bonus bosses from No More Heroes 2, the follow-up, which is a bit more... This is an odd one. This is definitely a more refined game. I won't go too much into the plot of this one, but it's very similar to the last one, but the big gimmick is you use 2 beam katanas. So this is a much better game, much more refined game, but it's a less memorable. But it's fantastic, and I suggest that you play both. The main difference between 1 and 2, besides the dual katana, is this has an open world where you do odd jobs in between those assassination missions, and they're not what you expect. They're like pick up trash, clean up around town, odd stuff like that. No More Heroes 2 sticks a little closer to something more traditional. There's no open world, but there's a bunch of 8-bit mini games that are a lot of fun, but they also involve you like picking up trash and like cooking at a like fast food restaurant for people. It's really fun and wacky. There's like the tone is all over the place. These are classics though. If you don't want to get them on the Wii, because actually they're kind of getting hard to play on the Wii, you can get them on the Switch, or you can get the first one on the PlayStation 3, like I said, No More Heroes 1 and 2. Fun bonus, though, that is only on these versions. If you play it on the Wiimote, when you get a call to do a hit to take out one of the assassins, the girl actually calls you on the Wiimote through the small speaker in there, and that's kind of a fun gimmick. Like you hold it up to your ear, so like a phone. No More Heroes 1 and 2. I said I'd do that quick, but I didn't. But sorry about that. I love those games. And Mad World for the Wii. This is a fun game. This is a pretty well-known game to my Platinum Games homies out there. So what Mad World is Platinum Games, which is one of the best action game creators, definitely the best action game creator on the planet. This is one of their first titles. And this was a game to kind of prove that the Wii just wasn't for kids. You play as Jack Kamen, buffed up dude with a chainsaw on his arm, who has to fight his way through a brutal reality show where like the whole point of the game is to kill your way out to the top to survive. This is a wacky game. Platinum is well known for their wacky games. They would go on to make games like Bayonetta and Vanquish and Metal Gear Rising. All fantastic, by the way. This game did get a sequel on the 360 on PS3. Pseudo-sequel. It's like the same cast, but like in a different world called Anarchy Reigns, which is also excellent. But this game is brimming with style. As you can see, this isn't just a stylistic choice. This whole game is in black and white except for the blood. So like you go through this world killing people in all these elaborate ways, including your chainsaw arm, and it's all black and white, but you can just cover the whole area in red because the blood just splatters everywhere. Great game, Mad World, super cheap on the Wii. No one bought this, but it's a great game. And speaking of super violent games, we're looking at Kirby next. We're looking at Kirby Return to Dreamland. So this is a really fun game that came out very late in the Wii's life, like late 2011. This game has an interesting history. This game started development as a Nintendo 64 game, then a Nintendo GameCube game, and finally released late in the Wii life cycle. This game had an 11-year development, and I don't know if 11 years of development shows in this game, but it's fun. It's a 4-player Kirby game, kind of a precursor to some of the later multiplayer Kirby games, where you can be like Waddle Dee and Kirby and DDD and just, you know, have fun in Dreamland, platforming adventure, nothing too unusual about it. But this game did have an unusual development and released late, so it's actually pretty rare. This is like a $50 to $70 game for whatever reason. I guess there just weren't that many copies. It wasn't marketed super well. So if you're looking for some fun co-op Kirby action, Kirby Return to Dreamland is the game for you if you have a few extra bucks to spend. Moving on to another Kirby game. This one was released incredibly late in the Wii's life cycle, about a month before the Wii U's launch in about September, October 2012. So what this is really cool. This is a collection of 6 Kirby games all in one disc. It's Kirby Dreamland 1, 2, and 3. It's Kirby Superstar, and it's Kirby 64 all on one disc. Did I forget any? I'm looking here. I'm cheating. Kirby's Adventure as well. And they're all in their original format. Game Boy, Nintendo, Super Nintendo. They're not remade. You can just play a Game Boy game on your Wii, and it's really novel and very cool. If you're a fan of the Kirby games and kind of want the history lesson on them, this one's great. You play it on the Wiimote, traditional Wii Classic controller. This game, what you're seeing here is the collector's edition. This was kind of the first batch of this game. What that came with was an art book, which is really cool. It kind of goes through Kirby's like development, and a soundtrack. But if you're looking for the regular copy of the game, that's what it looks like right there. This is very expensive now, strangely. Yet again, these late Wii games just get pricey. This could be anywhere between $50 to $100, but hey, it's 6 games, so that's a pretty good value. So check it out, the Kirby Collection on the Wii. All right, more late games. We're going to look at a game that is pretty popular right now. We're looking at Xenoblade Chronicles. So many of you may know this as a Switch game, a 3DS game. You may know Xenoblade Chronicles 2. With the recent announcement of Pyra and Mithra for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. But the original release of Xenoblade Chronicles is pretty interesting. So, yet again, this was brought out to the Wii in the United States pretty late in 2012. But it came out in Japan way earlier than that, a year and a half earlier. And it only came to the United States due to a fan campaign that is fairly famous called Operation Rainfall. Now, what Operation Rainfall is, it's something that doesn't work anymore. It would never work today, unfortunately, but it did back then. Operation Rainfall was a fan campaign to get 3 JRPGs that were Japanese exclusives for the Wii over to North America. The idea was that Nintendo didn't think that the Wii market, the Wii audience in America would want these big JRPGs. Well, this campaign proved them wrong. So 3 JRPGs were brought over to the United States and localized, all fantastically. It was dubbed in England, fantastic voice acting. And the biggest title of those 3 was Xenoblade Chronicles, along with a game called Pandora's Tower, which I do not have, and the next title we're about to talk about, The Last Story, spoilers. But Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii has an interesting release history amongst those. This was released as a GameStop exclusive in the United States and was very expensive at launch. And the way GameStop sold their games is they would actually open this and sell it as a used copy. Like, very bizarre. I used to work at a GameStop when I was younger in college, and yeah, they made you do weird stuff like this, but this was particularly odd. So you would open the game and sell it as used for like $70 US, $80 US. It was absurd, and this game was pretty sought after. Luckily, it was released on the Nintendo 3DS later. Not the best way to play an 80-hour open world JRPG, but then it was re-released on the Switch last year, and it looks amazing. That's the preferred version. That has all the bells and whistles and extras. However, this is a nice collector's item, and the price has gone down, and there's always a charm to playing stuff on the original hardware. Xenoblade Chronicles. My boy Shulk is really feeling this one. And like I said, their next title was also part of that Operation Rainfall. This one's very special. That is The Last Story. You're looking at the collector's edition of the game here. Now, what this was Yoshitaka Amano and the creators of Final Fantasy, Hironobu Sakaguchi, formed their own company. They left Square Enix after Final Fantasy X, very famous game on the PlayStation 2 that most of you viewers probably know about. Formed their own company, Mistwalker, to make other JRPGs without kind of the restrictions of Square Enix. One of them I've talked about in another video, Lost Odyssey, which is a fantastic Xbox 360 exclusive. Please check that out. However, very late in the Wii's lifespan again, in August 2012, they released this game exclusively for the Wii. This game is fantastic. This game is overlooked so much because it was a Wii exclusive late in the life. It's not the prettiest RPG in the world, but it has a great style. It has amazing music. Nobuo Uematsu is one of the greatest. He's the greatest music composer of all time in video games. And this game has like a real-time-esque battle system. You can have like 6 party members. You're like, you're a ragtag mercenary who finds a greater calling, needs to help a pretty girl. It's standard JRPG stuff, but like to a razor sheen, and just not too many people talk about this one. So please check this one out if you're a JRPG fan. The regular edition that you're seeing is starting to go up a little bit in price, like $30 to $70 at the time of recording. The collector's edition is already over $100, but it only comes with like a soundtrack and art book, which is nice, but it's not necessary. You really want to play this one, The Last Story. I mean, like, right on the cover, it says Hironobu Sakaguchi and Nobuo Uematsu. That's how influential they are. And sadly, this is the last game that Sakaguchi has directed. Like, he's done a bunch of mobile phone games, which is incredibly depressing after this. This is, like, the last real game he made. So check it out. It's a part of gaming history, The Last Story on the Wii. Okay, the last game we're going to talk about on the list, we went through that quicker than I thought, is the game I've probably put the most time in on the Wii, and that is a fighting game classic. That is Tatsunoko versus Capcom, as well as the Japanese version, Tatsunoko versus Capcom Cross Generation of Heroes. So, this is the game that made me get a Wii in the first place. Sticking with the Japanese version. What this is originally is, since Capcom had made a fighting game that involved their Capcom characters fighting Western comic book characters, Marvel versus Capcom, they decided to go to a Japanese animation studio, a very old, famous Japanese studio, Tatsunoko, and make a fighting game, a homegrown fighting game, pitting them against those anime characters. And I'll be the first to admit, like many in the West, I don't know a ton of those characters. Like, I know Gatchaman, I know Battle of the Planets, I knew Kasern, and I knew Karas from like a few anime movies that I had seen. But a lot of these characters on the Tatsunoko side were alien to me, but that made it more interesting. So in college, my friend imported this game, and we played the hell out of it. So I want you to imagine a 2v2 fighter in the vein of Marvel vs. Capcom, but 2.5D sprites, fantastic gameplay, amazing soundtrack. Not the most technically brilliant game, but just hype, just energy. This came out right around the time of the fighting game boom, like right around the time of Street Fighter 4, but before Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Like, this was incredibly overlooked because it was only on the Wii. And my buddy imported this, and we were like, there's no way this can come to the United States with all the licensing issues. Like, every one of the anime represented in this game belonged to a different publisher in the United States. So like, no, there's no way. And and lo and behold, it happened. 2 years later, Capcom hit us with a real shock. They decided to release Tatsunoko versus Capcom in the United States, and they changed it up a little bit, mostly for the better. So, going over to the American version, Ultimate AllStars, What they changed was they had to remove one character, this big stinky genie here. I always have trouble with his name. I believe it's Hakushin. He's like this big farting genie. Doesn't matter. No one liked him in the Japanese version anyway. They had to remove him because there was like some weird licensing issues, I believe, in Europe over his distribution. Doesn't matter. What they added were 5 new characters. They added on the Tatsunoko side Joe the Condor, who's kind of like, I guess, the Green Ranger of Battle of the Planets. And they added Yatterman too, like this like cute pink girl version of Yatterman. That's fine. But on the Capcom side, they added Zero from Mega Man and Frank West from Dead Rising. Oh, and I am so sorry. How dare I forget the Tatsunoko character, the third one they added. Tekkaman Blade, who may be the coolest character on the Tatsunoko side. So yeah, Tekkaman Blade, Yatterman 2, Joe the Condor, Zero from Mega Man, and Frank West were added to this version. Is it the definitive version? I'd say it's the better version. They also added online play to this. And believe it or not, I spent a few weekends playing it. It worked on the Wii in 2010. Yeah, this came out 2 years later in 2010. Very late Wii release again. And it worked. However, there are some slight differences for collectors out there, for my fighting game guys out there. The American version does have those 5 characters. And like I said, it doesn't have that genie. But there were some things I liked in the Japanese version more. Every time you tagged a character in or out, the music would change to that character's theme in the in the game. Like, so if you switch to Roll, like you would just hear Roll's music, and that was a nice effect. In the American version, that doesn't happen. Every stage has its own theme. However, it does have the greatest song in fighting game stage history, in my opinion, the Orbital stage. I will leave a link to that in the description because that song is hype as hell. So yeah, just that's one of the differences. Also, one sad difference is the Japanese version had a ton of mini games that were cut in the American version. There is one mini game in this, like a shooter, like a top-down shooter, but this one had like odd stuff, like Morgan, like how high you can do in a Zuna drop, like a spinning drop from like a bunch of fun little stuff. But overall, you want those characters. You want Tekkaman and Frank West. You want the American version. But hey, why not get both? Hell, I got 3 copies because let me mention, when this game launched in the United States, there was a launch party in the Nintendo store in New York, which I lived close enough to be able to travel to, and I expected a few people to show up. You know, this was a niche fighting game late in the Wii's life in January when it was freezing. No, there were 1,000 people at that launch. We had to wait online to meet the director of the game, Ryota Nitsuma, very nice guy. When we got up to him, he not only signed my copy of the game, he signed the piece of marketing that you've seen here for me. He also signed the pre-order bonus for me, which were these very cool like 3D cards with all like the characters and like the moves on the back. My buddy bought a Tatsunoko fight stick. Yes, there is a fight stick for the Nintendo Wii. He was a great guy, and he was super excited that there was such a turnout for this game. And I believe this game went to sell somewhere between 300 and 500,000 copies in the US, which was higher than expected. So it was a good sign to Capcom to bring these games over. Sadly, they still didn't make a Darkstalkers, but hey, it was a good time to be a fighting game fan. Yet again, fantastic roster in this game. The Capcom side has guys you wouldn't see. Batsu from Rival Schools, Soki from Onimusha. Yeah, there's an Onimusha character in a fighting game. Characters that like have been really overlooked. Like, this was the first time Beautiful Joe was playable in a fighting game. Alex from Street Fighter 3. I know I'm gushing at this point. Like, the robot from Lost Planet is a playable character, like a giant single like character that you can't have a tag team partner with. This game, so many fun nights in college, and up until this day, playing this all night long. This is my favorite game on the Wii, along with Fragile Dreams, but it hits a very different part of my brain. So check this out. This is getting rare. This is going for at least $50 now, so pick it up. It cannot be re-released with all these characters. Like, that is nearly an impossibility. Capcom is having a lot of licensing issues, like with things like their JoJo games and their Marvel games. So pick this up before it completely disappears. And yeah, Tatsunoko versus Capcom. I'm sorry I ranted about this one, but you know, I'm a fighting game guy. I love this stuff. And that kind of does it for the Nintendo Wii. And, you know, hopefully somewhere along the way here, somewhere in, like, after looking at all these quality titles, I hope we've been able to find some respect or reverence for this console that is often, like I said, looked back on as a gimmick that Nintendo kind of threw out there to make a quick buck. because, yeah, you know, there were tons of shovelware on this game, but there were also some quality titles. I would love to know if you know any games that I've missed, to please leave a comment, because I want to find more Wii games before they get really rare. You know, of course I have the classics like Mario Galaxy and Mario Galaxy 2 and all those fantastic games, but I'm sure there's still some hidden gems because there's so many games on the Wii that were good and just overlooked. So yet again, thank you for watching this so much. The next video we're going to do is going to be going over the Nintendo Wii Shop. Yes, the Nintendo Wii Shop was an amazing service on the Wii where you could download, buy, and keep. You can't do that on the Switch for a lot of games anymore. NES games, Super Nintendo games, Nintendo 64 games, Master System games, Sega Genesis games, TurboGrafx games, Commodore games for a bit, Neo Geo games, and games that were exclusive to the Wii. Yeah, there were games exclusive to the Wii. Unfortunately, a few years ago, the Wii Shop was taken offline, but luckily I was able to buy many of those games for preservation's sake. A lot of them are fantastic, and I'm going to do a huge video going over them soon, so please check back for that. And at the end of the day, yeah, the Wii, you were okay. I'm glad I have you. You had some special titles. So please look for my other videos, like I said, going over games like this on the Saturn, Dreamcast, Xbox, PlayStation 2, so on and so forth. And thank you so much for joining me. My name is Mike. This has been Chip Damage. Take care of yourselves.